Greetings and welcome once more to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of darkness once more? I hope you are. We're going to be heading not only into the world of darkness, but Changeling The Dreaming. So we're going to be going back into Changeling to learn about another Kith. Sidhe. Well, sort of. We'll talk about it. We are going to be talking about Sidhe. Not all of them, in a way. Anyway, I'm your host and guide here, Changeling The Dreaming, who's going to be leading you through a gateway, through the gauntlet, through the dreaming, to head over to the autumn world of the world of darkness and learn about the Kith there. Go visit them, learn about them, experience them, all those things. As your host and guide, I'm doing quite a little bit of tip. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, and let me know what you think of the Sidhe over in the comments below and everything you can learn about here. Alright. Open the gate. Grab my hand. Let's get going. To a world like our own. So different. The world of darkness. We've arrived! It does look a lot like our own world. It doesn't look like we've really gone anywhere, but trust me, Sidhe and changelings and all the other creatures of the world of darkness are now here. So, let's begin, of course, with Sidhe and some sources. These are the big sources that I used. I didn't use all the details from them, so if you want to go into more detail about information, hey, books. In this case, I do recommend the C20 book. The C20 book is a good update on information and is probably the best standard for where things sit in Changeling, though older editions like 2nd edition book does work very well. For some more specific books, other than the Player's Guide, which I do have down there at the bottom next to there, there's also Nobles, the Shining Host, which deals with not only Sidhe, but Nobility. It's probably the closest thing to a Kith book you have for Sidhe. So, yeah, it does a good job of being that, but it does also deal with just being Nobility, because there are other Kith and Kithcane that become Nobility within Changeling society. So just keep that in mind. Alright, let's begin talking about Sidhe. So, they are Kith born from the dreams of kings and queens. Noble and regal. Beautiful, graceful. Their power and coldness personified. They're tied intimately to the dreaming, and are, in most parts, new to the Changeling web. Most of those on Earth are exiles or escapees from Arcadia, unable to return home. They feel the cold sting of banality, far harsher than any other Kithcane. But they still command the seelie and unseelie courts, and want to survive winter. The easiest way to do it. And remember, Nobles, the Shining Host, they are known as the Nobles, the Shining Host. Yes. So we have to talk about their return, the return of the Nobles. And again, we're going to go into details. There's a little extra here. But 1969. 56 years ago. That's how long the Sidhe have been returned. After centuries, 9 millennia away. For so long, they were gone. And now they're back. The moon landing brought back the Sidhe. They brought back to reality. And a big part about this is they are suffering through the mists of memory. They don't remember their immortal past. Their myths and stories, both those from being a Sidhe or them personally, are just kind of beyond their grasp. They vaguely remember their times in Arcadia, all the ages immemorial where they were immortals in those realms remaining. They remember the antiquity, they remember all parts about it, but it just is kind of outside them. And so now they're finding themselves in this strange place of past and present where they kind of remember stuff, kind of understanding stuff. But they have not only survived here, they've triumphed. Due to their inner strengths, battling common and noble alike, understanding the system and their built-in place, they've succeeded. They've once again taken their place as nobility in Kithcane society. Of course, their absence wasn't really brought about and looked at very well, but again, it's just this kind of, like, interesting aspect of it all. And there are those that support them wholeheartedly. Again, ancient Changeling traditions, ancient traditions that are built in, the way things always work, the way things will work. There's also a lot of stuff. And there is oncoming cataclysms. What something like a vampire would call Gehenna, werewolves would call Apocalypse. Kithane called it Winter. And so these newly arrived nobles have to deal with winter, and maybe, again, this is kind of like going back to certain people kind of looking at it, maybe not everybody agrees with it, them being in a position where they can easily take charge and people listen to them will make it that they can lead the community to some kind of survival of winter. Again, there's a lot of, questions to this entire thing. And this is made to have you start thinking about things when we talk about Sidhe. Because this is the situation that we're going to be getting into. Let's talk history. Because this is a very important thing to look over the entire history of the Sidhe. And we're not going to go over all the details because, again, it's an entire mess that deals with a lot of full Changeling history, which I will have to probably one day do videos on the full Changeling history, cough, cough, Accordance War, and go into details about those. But we're going to kind of skim over the important parts and kind of understand it. And, of course, we have to start with the legendary Tuatha De Danaan. Tuatha De Danaan, the first Changeling, the first Kith game, the first Kith. The dreams personified. The beings that gave humanity dreams, and then in turn humanity gave them the ability to create the time of trouble, time of legends. Time when harpies, griffins, dragons, mythological creatures were part of the natural order, where they didn't disappear from common things. When the first Kith came into beings, trolls, pukas, all the others, came into being during these times. This was the Golden Age, which led to a Silver Age, and then led to a Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age happened right around the time that humanity brought about their Bronze Age, smelting metal. Others, the more enchanted, outside their creatures, the prodigals became into being, the children of Lilith, the skin changers, all of these creatures came into being. Which, again, changelings see, the Garu, as they were phase shape changers that became, changed a lot of that. They saw the children of Lilith, that she was a blood-mad fairy, created the vampires. So they see everything descended from them. Again, everybody has their own creation myths in this world of darkness. But again, this is the beginning of honor. And the Tuatha De Danaan disappear. They kill each other. Do they just leave? Who knows? They departed. And they left the world, Fae, and the first among the Sidhe. The first kings and queens of their kind. Their replacement, in a lot of ways. The Age of Iron. This is the Sundering. This is when iron was turned. The iron which could fight back against the Kith game. Humanity took the cities. Of course, Kith had to follow them. They are creatures of humanity as much as they are creatures of the dreaming. They're connected to them deeply. And of course, with the rising of cities and kings, so did come the Sidhe. Humanity created monarchies, the Fae followed suit. The great lords and ladies rose amongst the powers of the field. There were great kings and queens, great freeholds that did battle with each other, others that made peace, great kingdoms, songs about the ancient days, great knights. There were great clashes between the seelie and unseelie courts that, led to great wars between them. And again, in modern day, the enmity has cooled off. But again, there still is an ember of conflict between the seelie and unseelie courts. We cannot forget that. Even in today, in the world of darkness, in modern day version of Changeling, they are still rivals bitterly and deeply. And it's from this time, Sundering, that it was in full course. And this was still during the time when you could still pass the Arcadia and back, and there was great things like the stories of King Arthur and stuff like that came into pass, where mortals and Fae alike could travel back and forth. And then, the Shattering, which is not an exact time, but a period. I think that's a great point about it that, we can talk about. It is a period. It's not a sudden cataclysm. It's just a long, drawn-out process over human generations. The Shattering. One by one, the great noble houses, returned to Arcadia, never to return. 5 Seelie houses that have come back were the last to leave. And I want to talk about that. 5 Seelie houses. When we talk about the houses that are in Changeling, and Seelie ones too. And there are more than 5 houses, but these 5 houses are the core of what was there, because these are the ones that came back. It's a note there that I'm going to say now. The 5 that were last to leave, maybe that's why they were eventually exiled from Arcadia when the Resurgence happened. Maybe. And then went through Changeling changes. The Changeling Way was eventually adopted. A lot of things happened. There were some noble houses. The Merchant House, Scathach, that stayed in great numbers, in secret, in our world. So, here's where we have the separation between Arcadian Sidhe and Autumn Sidhe, which I will have to go into in another entire episode. There are 2 more episodes we're going to do on Sidhe. I'll tell you now. But now we can talk about, with the Shattering, some of them stayed. Not many. Some of them stayed. Adopted the Changeling Way right then and there. And that's where we have a separation of Sidhe. It's important to note. It exists. And it existed before C20, but they kind of solidified it at C20. The Great Portals were done, and a twilight time comes into. The Innterregnum, the twilight, the fall. Over 600 years of memory that's actually stolen from those that left to Arcadia. The hazy time of 6 centuries, where all these nobles that left after the Shattering went to Arcadia. What happened during that time? Who knows? They don't know, they don't remember. It's a shadow. It's lost memory. It's hazy. It's there. They knew they were Arcadia. They've got hazy images of it, but it's not like an exact thing. It's lost so much. And it's on the other side of these Sidhe that have returned, these Arcadian Sidhe. They also have to contend with, they missed out in 600 years. The Renaissance, great scientists, great stories, great world wars, a lot of bad and good things that happened over a massive period of time. So they're lost in 2 ways. Lost in old world and lost to a new world. But again, this is during a time when the commoners made their lands, made their ways. They figured out ways to survive and build and survive during this time period. This was the time of the great societies and changelings we know about now. All right. The Resurgence. Resurgence is an important event. We gotta talk. There are those that claimed it was going to happen. And again, like, all we know is the 5 great houses. They're not the only ones to come through. Are the 5 that showed up front and center when the Resurgence happened, with the Moonland, with this dreaming that shattered through all of mortal humanities, and then through the changelings. Fuzzy days and fuzzy minds of those now on Earth. Encountering commoners, common nobles, and of course those that stayed behind. And then we get to the Accordance War. I'm not going to really hit too much into details about the Accordance War. I think the Accordance War, the full thing, has to have the video of itself. But the Sidhe are an integral part of the Accordance War. They wanted to regain their position as nobles in charge of everybody. And there were probably those people that were fine. There were those that were like, oh yeah, sure, that's fine. It's old tradition. I don't mind. We're already ruled over by other nobles. You guys are just better at it, probably. But there were those that didn't want that. The differences and changes. The world was not the same. It is not the same world. And the Accordance War went on until High King David did his best job to basically solve the problem. And he did, for now. David did a good job. David Ardra. he managed to make peace. And there were concessions by the Sidhe, but certainly speaking, it's not quite the status quo, but it's kind of like returning to the status quo. The Sidhe really won, but not a full victory. They had to make concessions, they had to make changes the way things work. It's why now there are a lot more commoner Kith and Kith King that are nobles now. That noble houses can have a lot more than just Sidhe in them, and the nobility is much more than just Sidhe, when it was just Sidhe before. Things have opened up more, and there are more voices in the way that things are ruled. But again, we'll talk about why the return of this status quo is both good and bad, and kind of this odd thing about what's going on. But that's important. And again, I'll have to dive really deep about it soon. So, today, there's peace. The Kingdom of Concordia, the Americas, under King David, and being a High King, has gone well. And things have returned to not quite what they were before, the Sundering, the Shattering, and all that stuff, and the Changeling way. But certainly speaking, winter is coming and things must be done. And there are 3 seemingly voices within the Sidhe community. Traditionalists want to return to the time before the Sundering, when they had unquestionable rulerships. The Reformists, who support the traditional institutions of the monarchy, but want to be more egalitarian instrument. So they're basically like, they want to maybe make things a little bit more, constitutional monarchies or something like that. They still want to have positions of power, but they believe that, there is more to it than that. The Reformists. And then the Modernists, who believe that the nobility must give up some of its power, become part of the modern world. That's probably more akin to places like, England, where there's a figurehead in the, monarchy and, the nobility, but then there's, a government leading it. So there's a kind of 3 things. There's the people that want to keep everything the same, people that change things completely, and the people that are kind of in the middle that are like, well, we can kind of change things a little bit. And the thing is, there are these 3 voices in amongst the noble houses in Sidhe society. There are those that, have seen what has happened and understanding the new world they're in and being like, yeah, no, we can't work like we used to. And there are those that are like, well, we can kind of work like we used to. And those are like, that, screw that, we'll just keep the same. So it's an interesting position that all of it exists in today with the Sidhe society. It's a mixed mess. And there could be just... It doesn't necessarily have to be like, I'm in this noble house, and the noble house thinks this way. There could be influences within that noble house which also affect that. Let's talk about the nobility as a power source. Power for power's sake is rare, even among the former nobility of Arcadia. Fey tyrants even still have a guiding vision. Fey nobility, monarchy is the right and natural state of Kith. All the others are strange. And modernists are the only exception. They are the exception because all other Sidhe consider a form of monarchy, with them at the top, to be the correct way of doing things. Again, as I said, constitutional monarchy for the one group there, things like that, where it's the moderns are the only ones that are like, maybe we can figure out a different type of government, And noble statuses has a lot of privileges. But the thing is, they have a code of old laws they brought back with them. Commoners, well, they always like the old laws, because again, some of those old laws still exist, others are archaic, and basically, depending on the freehold you're in, depends on how strict the nobles are there. But, it's a mixed bag of these new people in charge. So, yeah. And yes, with all the printing and posturing, the returned nobles have not enforced many of the onerous laws. Because remember, they're coming back to the old laws, of which some are still on the books, others have disappeared. So, because your average changeling hasn't had its normal life affected with change of leadership, the new hierarchy is no worse, maybe better, than those that were before them. Because again, a big thing about Sidhe, which we're going to talk about here, is they believe the nobility is in place to serve and look after the people. They just treat everybody else like children. All the commoners are children to be looked after. So they do, seelie or unseelie, look after the people under them. They believe in that, interestingly enough. But again, yeah. And of course, you know, they knew how to take advantage of all the Kith, and they're not well organized. They hate each other. We can play them against it. They may hate us, but they also hate each other. We can play it against that and make it easy to keep control. So, yeah. If you look at a city, let's talk about their appearance and some of their seemings and abilities here for a second. Beautiful, unearthly beautiful, perfect bodies, features that are pleasing, rich hair color. Ethereal, carrying a hint of sadness, even when they laugh. Tall, lean, regal, pointed ears, angular features, commanding gaze. Eyes are striking colors like violet or silver. Finest clothes. As childlings, they know the blessings they inherit from an early age. They best to act with as perfect little gentlemen and ladies. But the worst are spoiled, rotten, and throw tantrums when they don't get over. As wilders, they've had the opportunity to indulge in every whim outside of court. They're high-spirited and sumptuous on occasion. They're watched carefully once court begins. Seelie are confident in their chivalry, and nobility will prevail, and unseelie are rebellious and scheme for power. As a grump, they realize their lofty positions, carry the burdens of memories, pine for the glory days, and grieve for mistakes they've made. So, they do have a realm affinity. They haven't been on Earth long enough for that to come into being. We won't really talk about it. They have a great extra. They've all in beauty. They get basically, mechanically wise, 2 extra dots of appearance that could take it above 5. So during character creation, if you make your character and choose to have a 5 appearance, you will have a 7. Because as soon as you choose to be Sidhe, you get +2. Yeah. And they're just noble. But again, then they have to deal with banality does terrible things to them. Each temporary point against them, they get 2. So, yeah. They get screwed over from it. And they're also subject to fit of depression. You know, thinking about their ancient legacies and stuff like that. Let's talk about this Escheat, the laws of Kith. Because it's important to look at the laws. The Sidhe reside over it. I'm gonna drink while that ambulance goes by. As you probably do. Maybe. So, Sidhe are imperious and arrogant, but they don't consider themselves above their own laws. This is an important thing. These 6 laws are very important to them. But we have to look at what the law is and how the reality works for all 6 of these laws, because it paints a picture of Sidhe aren't stupid, you know? They have a different view of it, but they also understand that, like, things work certain ways. They're not, like, gonna try to force it. Like, you know, they can see when they've got a square peg and they're trying to fit in a round hole. They're like, yeah. The right to mace. A lord is king of his domain. He's judge, jury over crimes, large or small. His word's law. A noble is to be obeyed by vassals, respected by other, respect laws. This is important to nobility. It's a monarchical system. They've done a reasonable expectation to democratize the institution. They are surprised commoners want more, but again, like, you have to think about commoners nowadays can watch news networks, C-SPAN, learn about various commoners. You know, they believe in the divine right of kings, their subjects don't, so they have to, now, rule through force, guile, charisma, and tradition. Those 4 things are what they use to rule. The law itself doesn't help anyone, and they know it. The right to dream. Morals have the right to dream unhindered by our needs. The dreaming will die if we steal directly from the font. So, there was a civilized time when glamour was plentiful and ravaging unnecessary. Sidhe nobility still enforced the position of this Escheat. Unseelie lords do not have nearly the same moral compunction about ravaging, but there are exceptions always made to this rule in case of extreme emergencies. So, yeah, it's one of those things it's sort of like, oh, you freed all the glamour you want. Right of ignorance. Do not betray the dreaming to Banal. Never reveal stuff to humanity. Humankind will hunt us. You know, that kind of thing. This is really needed to enforce this as commanders fall out of habit, honestly. You know, they've survived for centuries. But, again, they've also introduced changelings, human bloodlines. Remember, they took on human bodies as the changeling way. They have human relatives nowadays. So, yeah, sometimes relatives will learn about the Fae. And so this part of this Escheat is kind of like up in the air. Because nobles will still, many Sidhe nobles will privately consider human kinfolk to be a violation. And they also consider the mixing of human and Fae blood to be degrading. And there are some things like the traditionalists that would feel like, maybe we should kill off all the mortals that have learned too much or have our bloodline. You know, keep strong, you know, something like that. So yeah, you can see there's a bit of a mess here with that one, the right of ignorance, because it's technically followed, but there's like sides to it that's very interesting. You can see where the Sidhe can keep it. The right to rescue from foul grip of banality. You're in danger, you need to survive. Commoners and nobles respect that one. Different reasons. Commoners are all for one, of course. Banality is a terrible thing. Nobility's a little different because Sidhe are vastly outnumbered. Losing anything to banality, terrible idea. They're not acclimated to Earth like any others. So, yeah. The right to a safe haven. All places of the dreaming are sacred. You know, admitting people freely into a place. There's an even divide in Sidhe, how they follow this. A lot of times we'll pay lip service. You know, a strange Kithane shows up, you know, you'll let them in, kind of be nice to them. But, you know, there are those that do deny free access to do so because they fear that too many changelings in a freehold will deplete glamour. Security involved and all that stuff like that. You know, so it's kind of like a mixed bag. And then, of course, the right to life. You know, Kith can't just spill the blood of another. This is strictly and vigorously delayed and enforced by nobility. And it's severe traditions for Britain. And that's where you kind of have to talk about the justice side of things. It's an abstract conquest. And even unseelie place a high value on justice. So this is a very interesting thing that both Seelie and Unseelie believe in a justice. A rightful punishment for things. That oaths are very important. That a solemn brow broken results in destruction and stuff like that. Justice can be taken to the extreme, almost become vengeance sometimes, where a single slight can never be forgiven or forgotten, and reprisals can be swift, and it kind of is like a fine line a lot of times. And most nobles are slow to anger than most commoners. Perhaps because of their situation, their good breeding, nobilis oblige, they're just kind of cool with it. And, you know, they rarely need to resort to force or draconian legal methods to maintain order. But they do have two tiers of a court system. A commoner courts and uassal or high courts. So, there are two court systems in place for a little bit, and these have been established by the current Sidhe. And they have some enforcements of this. Bring us to our right. Being a king isn't everything it was set out. It's responsibility to his subjects. We'll talk about this. There are only a few nobles who do not take the responsibility of being a noble seriously. The majority of Sidhe, commoner, Sidhe, Seelie or Unseelie, do just that. I'm talking about everyone who takes a noble position in changing society tries to take it seriously. If you don't care for the subjects, you get a rebellion. They're instructed it's a sacred duty to protect the subjects and treat them justly. And again, that comes into treating those below you as kids. So it's kind of like this weird thing of like they try to do best by them, the good deeds to the people lowers of them. But again, there are thousands of factions, thousands of smaller communities, geographically changed and stuff like that over the Innterregnum. And so it's a society that's very hard to find the right way to do things for stuff. And it's a kind of mess of a society since the Resurgence that they've kind of thrown themselves onto. And we can also see that corruption by power is not just a providence of the Seelie Court. Even Seelie nobles can be corrupted by their own power. There's a code of ethics, and it does help that they have this code of ethics that does apply to both Seelie and Unseelie. An interesting thing on both sides. Granted, again, interpretations and levels of the code and stuff like that do differ between Seelie and Unseelie. More righteous, more, willing to stab people in the back and stuff like that. But again, it's not perfect. And you get people that are ideologues, that they have a perfect vision that they want to force power mongers, duelists who switch allegiances here and there, or people that just go insane. And it makes for a very difficult time somewhere for the situation. Power can corrupt. Talk about the courts and a little bit of politics here, too. Because if you want to deal with political intrigue, you will play Changeling. You play Changeling related to the nobility of the Changelings. Because the scheming and political intrigue of vampires, the machinations of technomancers, are no match, either of these, for the subtlety and complexity of court life in the Changeling world. As much as they don't remember their times in Arcadia, they know what it is to be a noble. Woo. You might not know the modern world, but heck, I know my old house rivalries, my medieval concerns, and all those different things. And I'm going to debate them, even if the things I'm going to talk about don't rely to modern world at all. That is also an issue sometimes that comes up. The court is a pageantry too. I think it's one of those things is they love to have court be held in these places that look like pre-Sundering glory, that they'll get the best artisans to rework these mock-ups of the great noble wonders of the ancient days of fairy architecture and innovation, with Secrets of Arcadia and the modern world combined together to be something that's just this beautiful situation where you're going to hold these courts. It's dressed to impress as much as it, holding yourself. The entire situation is just important, and you are required to stay in form during there, and you got to follow it there heavily if you're beating them. So, yeah. There's the Parliament of Dreams, political impulses, open court, closed court, privy court, the revenue. I'm not going to deal with that because dealing with the Parliament of Dreams gets into Changeling politics, which does go beyond just the Sidhe, but I'm just mentioning them now. Now, before we move on from courts, we got to talk about the Shadow Court. Because, as much as we like to talk about the 5 noble houses that showed up with the Resurgence, they weren't the only ones to show up. The Unseelie Court showed up, disappeared. Yeah. The Unseelie did show up too. They just effed off. Didn't say a thing. The Seelie, Sidhe, went and gone and fought a accordance war. What the hell's the Unseelie Court doing? Well. Here's the thing to keep in point. In the commoner world, Seelie and Unseelie have made a general peace. There's still that ember of conflict. But with the Sidhe and Seelie and Unseelie never did. There are some theories that the war between these two sets of courts led them to being exiled. And maybe they're biding their time to strike, to re-emerge. But Seelie nobility recognize that Unseelie is an integral part of the changing nature. And there's no rules for Unseelie nobles to not participate in governing the Parliament of Dreams. But they stay underground. They do have some contact with the Seelie courts, maybe mostly to keep tabs on them. So it's kind of hard to see where they're at. And you really can't tell when you're meeting someone whether they're Seelie or Unseelie, unless, some of their actions. So again, it's like one of those different things. There are 3 political impulses in Unseelie court life. They have traditionalists too, which want to go back to the old way where Seelie and Unseelie courts took time over the course of a year taking control. Another one believes the Seelie court has ruled long enough, and it's time for the Unseelie to have complete power. And the third one believes that there should be no rulers. No one knows which of these 3 groups has the most power in the Shadow Court. But yes, there are 3 major things. And the thing is, they have not shown themselves. They're just biding their time in the background, waiting to pop up and be like, oh, hello! We're the Unseelie Court. We've been here the entire time. I'm not going to go into full detail about the houses, but I will talk about them a little bit. Because, currently, there are 16 houses. Let me say, wait a second, wasn't there 5? Well, there's a lot to this. I'm going to mention the houses. I'm going to talk about the houses. And I'm going to kind of hint at these. There are 7 Seelie houses, 7 Unseelie houses, and 2 technically unaligned houses that kind of are partially aligned with some of the Seelie houses, but not quite. House Beaumont were imprisoned in Arcadia and returned to Earth with the second Resurgence. Yes, there was a second Resurgence, which we haven't ever talked about. What was it? Everything that happened at the turn of the century. 9/11, War on Terror, all those different times there. It was Nightmare Grim. And it caused a second mirror resurgence. And so, House Beaumont returned during then. House Dogel, House Ulinid, House Fiona, and House Gwydion are all major Sidhe houses. House Liam is an important one because they're very quiet. And they are one of the 2 houses that remain behind. No one really talks about them because they're very quiet. But yeah, they know they were here. So yeah, there were some of them, but they were just thrown out. So again, it's a house that has representation. There are lost ones, basically ones that did not go to Arcanium than any other house. They who did not flee to Arcadia. So lost ones are the term that we can kind of use for the Sidhe that stayed behind. And so yes, now granted, it wasn't all House Liam. Some House Liam went to Arcadia, but of them, there was a chunk of them that did not. And again, we only talked about one house that was like that. We'll get to the other. Let's talk about the 7 Unseelie houses, because we know these houses, but again, I'm not going to get into details about what they're doing. House Aeson, House Ililili, House Baelor, House Darian, and if I butcher any, Daron, if I butcher any of these, okay, that's all pronunciation. House Lianan, House Varich. I tried to butcher some of those earlier ones, and I just saw that there was pronunciations on my stuff here, and I sorry if I mispronounced anything there. Those are the Unseelie houses. And the 2 last houses, just to mention, to finish up today, is of course House Thatch, the merchant house that basically is nominally aligned towards Seelie, but they really are neutral. Skaha. Oh, they're Skaha. Ow. I would not have thought they were pronounced that way. I'm talking about them the entire time, and I'm like, that's it? So, yeah, they've been around. Cool. They're big lost one. They've been on Earth. Thumbs up. They've done a lot of stuff, too. Again, if I go into all the noble houses, I'd probably be here for like another hour. And then finally, House Danaan. House Danaan is interesting because it was originally going to be in the Time of Judgment book and never was published there. And the author of that talked about it, that it was cut material. But in C20, they formally made House Danaan part of that. House Danaan basically has returned to Earth, but they've remained in the Dreaming. They've been keeping the basically ancient pathways and long-lost strongholds along that open. They've basically been guarding the Dreaming side of things. They're nominally allied with the Unseelie Court, but it's nominal, but they really don't have the intrigue or interests of the other Unseelie houses, so it's sort of like, they're a little bit foot into Unseelie, but they're not really aligned with it. They're still got their job that they kind of do as a house. And so, again, they're an interesting group, too, because, again, thank you C20 for making something that was dropped notes in an older book official. And they got a cool, like, Skeletal Dragon as a house sigil. Again, all of them have house sigils, which are really neat, and maybe one day, I will do an entire thing of noble houses of Fae. Maybe. Because there are all these here, which may I note, some of these houses that do include more than just your average Sidhe. There are some houses that have non-Sidhe. Like House Non, which I mentioned, is a lone noble house that has a non-Sidhe as High Lord, and a Shu named Dice. And they adopt a lot more commoners to become nobles within their house. So they have a Shu, Pixies, Satyrs, Knockers. Anyone that wants to learn more about the Dreaming is welcomed into their house, because they are the keepers of the Dreaming in a lot of ways. It is a fascinating house that has, evolved. And they're willing to have non-Sidhe in front of them because they're all about one thing. And if you are interested in that and want to join with them, they'd love to have you. But yes, I may do a video in the future, or maybe do some videos in the future where I dive into houses. That might be an interesting thing. When we're done all the Kith and stuff, and etc., etc., there's a long list. A long list. Anyway, I'll leave that here for now. There's always more I could do, but I recommend checking out, like, the Noble book. And again, if you look into the Nobility, you're really getting into the Sidhe in a lot of ways. As I said, the Noble's Shining Host, well, it really is the Sidhe Kith book, but again, Sidhe aren't the only nobles. There are commoner nobles, and it's even so more now. It's a situation that's very interesting in a lot of things, and it does make for talk about it. It is important to note that I will be doing more videos on the Sidhe too. This is just one video of 3, because I do want to kind of focus a little bit more on both the Arcadian Sidhe and Autumn Sidhe on their own, because as much as they are still both Sidhe, they are major subgroups that separate. Autumn Sidhe, mechanically, at least in C20, are different than Arcadian Sidhe. They were exactly the same in older editions, but by the time we get to C20, these are variants now, because they should have been treated that way. Those that remain behind have adapted. Those that didn't have not. Again, we knew about Autumn Sidhe from House Skaha. Can't believe it's pronounced that way. I look at the name, and I can't believe it's pronounced that way. Every time I want to say how it's Skathach, it looks like to me, but again, it's supposed to be Skaha. And again, it's so fascinating, the differences between them, and it is a cultural difference as much as it is also a difference of generation, of time. So they do deserve to be looked at separately. And I will talk about them separately. They're probably not going to be as long as this video. And I hope you enjoyed diving into them, and I hope you've enjoyed diving to Sidhe as they've been. And I think that's where we will leave it. If you want to check out more of my stuff, please check me out either live on Twitch or over on YouTube. Twitch, I do all the tabletop recordings and stuff like there. You can catch me live, chat about all these topics, dive into it, chat about other tabletop topics. All the tabletop stuff goes up on YouTube. So you don't have to worry about just catching it on Twitch. If you can't join me live on Twitch, you can always catch all tabletop stuff on YouTube. That includes videos like this, live plays of TTRPGs like Fall of Avenswolves, Wednesday at 8, my discussion, slow, almost podcast, discussing tabletop, Saturdays at 6. I do also do some other stuff over Twitch, gaming, hanging out, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to check out just me in general, I've got social media link below. Please do remember the YouTube stuff. And, what do you think about the Sidhe and their situation? And again, maybe some of your opinions will be kind of shaped when we do the other 2 videos on it. And again, I'll probably do a Noble House / history videos once I've done all the Kith, and of course their Thalian counterparts. Because we haven't even gotten to the Thalians. Jeez. We got 1 billion of these videos to do. We got 1 billion of them. The Thalian being the Unseelie cousins, serpents and Formians, created from the primal savage dream. We haven't even gotten to the Thalians. Anyway, until the next time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.